Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Khoj Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. The recitation today is from Sri Rag Ki War, but we transition to the composition of Bhagat Kabir Ji. The sabad is entitled Ik Oankar Satgur Prasad Sri Rag Kabir Jiyo Ka एक स्वान कै कर गावना। जननी जानत सुत बड़ा होत है, इतना को न जाने जे दिन दिन अवध घटत है। मोर मोर कर अधिक लाड धरै, पेकत ही जम राव हसै। ऐसा तैं जग भरम लाया, कैसे बूझे जब मोहया है माया रहाओ। कहत कबीर छोड़ बिखया रस, इत संगत नहचो मरना। रमैया जपो प्राणी, अनत जीवन बाणी। इन विधि भव सागर तरना, जां तिस भावै तां लागे पाओ। परम पुलावा विचों जाए, उपजै सहज ज्ञान मत जागै। गुर प्रसाद अंतर लिव लागै, इत संगत नाही मरना। हुक्म पछाण तां खसमै मिलना, रहाओ दूजा। So as mentioned, within Sri Rag, we are now transitioning to the composition of Kabir Ji, Sri Rag Kabir Jiyo Ka. And we noticed that the structure of this shabad does not have a pauri, but instead it has two rahaus, reflective pauses. Now this device of having two rahaus, or two pauses or reflections, is used in Gurbani occasionally to stress a running theme, where the second reflection is usually a response to or an elaboration of the first. In this instance, the first rahau asks the question, Kaise bujhe jab moya hai maya? That is, how does one develop the discernment to break the hypnotic spell of worldly attachments? And the second rahau lines the response, Hukam pashane ta khasme milna. By harmonizing with Hukam is the truth perceived. The instruction atop this shabad also states that it is to be recited in the same beat as the sabad Ek Swan, which, if you may recall, is the 29th verse in Sri Rag on page 24 of Guru Granth Sahib. And the recommendation there is Kar Chautha, meaning it is to be sung in the fourth beat, for those of you who are musically inclined. So in this verse, what Kabir Ji is starting out by saying is that things are not always what they appear to be. The senses can be very deceptive, and indeed are. And he gives us the instance of a mother of a child who is filled with attachment, more kar adhik laad tare, and believes, is of the conviction that the child is growing with each passing day. Janat Sut bada hota hai. Janat Sut bada hota hai. She thinks that her child is growing. Kabirji says this is really a deception and an illusion of our material existence. Because think about it. In reality, the child's lifespan is actually diminishing. And he says, Itna ka na janne, din din avad ghatat hai. That she is so mindless, the mother, that she does not even realize that the child's life is in fact diminishing day by day. So there is a message here for us that physical death is at some level inevitable. It happens. But this is the human condition that has been given to us. We are born with this condition. Aisa Tain Jag Paramalaya. Tain here refers to the Creator. And it says here, the force of Maya has hypnotized us to such a degree that we do not realize that it is really a deception. What is not permanent appears permanent to us and causes us to become attached to it. So the question Kabirji poses is, how can one possibly break this hypnosis? Kaise bujhe jab mohya hai maya? Mohya, when I'm deluded by Maya, the material world, the world that we live in, the temptations, the attachments, the aversions. Kabirji goes on to provide us with some clues and an answer. The first thing he says is, give up the poisonous drug and recognize that physical death is inevitable. Kahat Kabir, Shod Bikhya Ras, It Sangat Nehcho Marana. Guaranteed death. The poisonous drug being referred to here is the drug of attachments and aversions, which incidentally arise out of a fear of death, which is impermanence. The fear of death is what subjects us to a form of slavery all our lives. And it is the fear of death that holds us in bondage. And so this is what Gurbani defines as the ocean of fear, because our existence then becomes an ocean of fear in which we are drowning. Bhavsagar, it calls it, or Bhavjal. Now, Kabirji's recommendation is that in order to overcome the fear of death and swim across the ocean of fear comes through an understanding of the all-pervading self. In other words, we have to be able to see through the impermanence and see that all-pervading, unchanging, eternal self that forms the backdrop of this changing world, and come to recognize that we are indeed that unchanging self that is witnessing the drama being played out. This perception or understanding comes through the life-giving wisdom of the self. Ramaya Japa Prani Anat Jivan. So, by understanding Ramaya, the all-pervading self, through its Bani, Inbid Pavasagar Tarana, crossing across the ocean of fear. In other words, overcoming the fear of death. So it's clear that Gurbani then is the vehicle for that wisdom. That is where we begin. When we engage with Gurbani, what happens? It arouses in us a love for that self, a desire to know it. That's the first step. You have to have a desire to even know it. Jat se pave ta lage pao. You first have to develop a feeling for what the self is before you can even begin to love it. And that wisdom will enable you to break the hypnotic spell from within, param pulave vichon jaye, and then you begin to develop this sense of love and awareness. The mind gradually becomes steadfast and self-aware, and the intellect becomes discerning. Upje sahaj, gyan mat jage. So through the insight of Gurbani, the mind realizes its own authentic, eternal self. and recognizes that there is no death. It sangat nahi marna. In such a state, the mind is attuned and in harmony with hukam. Hukam pashan ta khasme milna. With those thoughts, until the next time, Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.